And what we're going to talk about today is called the model history tree. We're going to primarily be looking at that browser. And the browser is going to be all important when you get into investor. A lot of the action happens in the browser. Okay. So if you have your book, we're going to be working through that little model on chapter 9. If you don't have it, I'll have the information here for you. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new file. Okay. So we're going to go to the new option. And remember, you've got the different templates. We are going to start out in an English template. So make sure you're not in metric. Go to the English. We're going to grab the standard IPT. Okay, so remember, IPT is a part file, an inventor part file. And then we're going to just hit create. It takes it a little bit to get that loaded. So this will become pretty standard after a while. You'll be doing this all the time. So I think you're going to get used to that. So what we're looking at here is this area over here, the model browser. And there's a lot that goes on over here. And it's a complete record of what's going on as you're creating stuff. We haven't looked at this yet. Probably next week we will. But if you open up this Origin tab, you'll notice there's your different planes you can interact with. And you can actually make some visible, invisible, those kind of things, which we'll see. Those are helpful. You can also do that with your axis, your lines. So we're going to see, though, that everything that's going to be impacted in there is going to work that way. So we're going to start out by kind of creating a strategy. We're going to draw a simple sketch. We're going to extrude that sketch. Then we're going to add another part, extrude it, also show you that we can edit very easily through that browser. Okay? And how everything is connected. A is connected to B, B is connected to C kind of thing. So there's that hierarchy and a tree kind of situation going on, and the browser keeps track of all of that for us. So we're going to go to the 2D sketch mode. Okay? And notice these are your sketch planes. You should be aware of that. So the ones you see here is your XY, or your YZ, or your XZ. Now technically it doesn't really necessarily matter where you start in a drawing file a lot of times. But we're going to just go ahead and start in this XY plane. So just go ahead and click on that, and it should come in like this. Now, very often what will happen to me is like this guy will be rotated. So notice front will be turned on its side. Okay, if it is, I would just hit that until you see front so you can read it. Okay, but you should be in what we would call a front mode. Okay, so we're going to start out, create a very simple 2D sketch. We're not going to worry about the dimensions so much, but just kind of follow with me what I'm doing. I'm going to go into a line, and I'm just going to generate a line from here to here. Now make sure that when you do this, you're going to get that little symbol that's going to pop up. That's a parallel symbol, so that what that's doing is it's running it parallel to the axis up here. So when you see that, don't worry about the distance. Click it. We're going to come up perpendicular. We're going to come over. We're going to come up. We're going to come over. And we're going to come over down, rather, not in coincident with that other line. We want to be a little bit above it. And we're going to come over. We're going to come up until we're, notice that little line that pops out. That's telling me I'm coincident with the top of that. So I'm going to be there. Then I'm going to come over until I get another line that dashes out. Then I'm going to be there, and I'm going to bring it down. So there's my figure. And these little symbols that you're seeing here, these are called constraints, and we're going to talk about these next. So what that's saying is that's constraint perpendicular, okay, which is important. You can add those or remove those later on, but we're going to just kind of keep those as they are right now. All right, so we are done doing lines. So one way to get done with the line command is just hit the escape key, or you can right click and go to the shortcut and either hit escape or you can hit OK. Okay, either way. We want to now drop some dimensions. So I'm going to place a dimension on this bottom one. And I'm going to make that 3.25. So whatever that is, make it 325. Then we're going to bring from top to bottom on the side there. And I want that to be 1.75. Okay, so my overall base dimensions are 325 by 175. Okay. We're then going to go from this edge to that edge, and we're going to make that 2 inches. All right. And then this top guy will be a half. And this top guy will also be a half. Okay. So we have 2 more we're going to place. One on this side. We're going to make that a half a unit. And from middle to bottom, we're going to make that 0.75. So your picture should look somewhat like mine. Make sure your dimensions are like mine. And don't worry about where we are with respect to the axis. We could lock that in there, but we don't necessarily care. And that depends on what you're doing. Sometimes I like to have my part somewhat referenced to my origin, but I don't have to have it anywhere in an origin, okay? So I don't worry about that as much. But I could lock that by placing a dimension from here to here, making that like 0. I can do that if I needed to, okay? But I'm not going to worry about it, okay? Does everybody have those values? Yes, Kevin?
That 0.75 is
From this guy to this guy. So notice it's a quarter higher than it is on the edge here because this is 0.75, okay? All right, anybody else questions? Now keep in mind, this is a sketch, so if we do make mistakes, we can always edit it. That's the beauty of it, right? Okay, so if you've got that, you're going to finish the sketch. You can come up here to finish sketch, or you can right-click, and you could also go finish sketch. But you should come back to a view like this, right? And we're noticing that we're seeing that. So what we're going to do is, if you've got it to that point, we're going to extrude this guy. Now, a lot of times, extrude will pick up your profile right away. If it doesn't, then you just click in it. Now, there's, remember, 2 ways to extrude, essentially. Well, in this case, there's only one. We can do a joint extrusion or a cut extrusion. All we can do is a joint, essentially. But you have different directions. You can go to the left. You can go to the right. You can go symmetric. Or you can go asymmetric, so it can be something on one side A versus something on the other side B. We're going to do a symmetric. We're going to do a symmetric, and the distance is going to be 2.5. So what that does, it's doing 1.25 out and 1.25 the other way. Okay, so it's always the total distance that you're entering. Does that work for everybody? Okay, if you're good with that, then you can just go ahead and hit OK. So what we can do is anytime I do any part modeling, the first thing I'm going to do is look at it in 3D space. So I'm going to hit the Shift key, middle mouse, and I'm going to rotate this guy around, and I'm going to look at it from all edges just to make sure it looks right, you know? So I always do that. That's really a good idea. You could also do things like, what's it look like on the top or on a side view? I can do it that way as well, okay? After you've taken a look at it, go ahead and get it back into an isometric view. And we would do that by hitting, anybody remember what you would select? If you hit the F6 function key, it'll take you to an isometric view. Okay. That's a really good one to remember, okay? Definitely. All right, so let's look at the model tree, the browser over here. And we should be aware of this. You should have extrusion, and then there's the sketch associated with it, okay? And the cool thing is that if you wanted to edit your sketch, you can just double click on your sketch, and you can edit it that way, okay? What's that? why it probably had to do with the mapping issue. You really ought to follow what's going on here. Okay, are we good on that then? Okay, so we're going to keep in mind that our sketch, we can edit things, and we will edit things because it's kind of neat to show you how that editing tools work. That's really, really neat. So we're going to edit another part on this. We're going to put a circle underneath this thing. So what we're going to do is go into a 2D sketch mode. And what I want to do is be underneath it. So I'm going to just shift a little bit so I can see the underneath piece. I'm going to click on the underneath face like that. Okay. And what we're going to do is add a circle right here on this piece. So I'm going to go to this circle mode. Now there's several different circles, so you want to do a center point circle. And what I want to do is attach the circle to the center or the midpoint of this line. So if you come up here and you get a yellow dot, that means you're not in a center. But if you hit it where you get a green one, that should be a center point. Now you can also right click and you can go to point snaps and you can say midpoint and it'll snap to a midpoint for you. Okay, so you can do it either way. But what I want to do is then attach that guy to that point. And so those are locked in now. Locked in at midpoint and it's locked into the edge. So we don't need to give that thing a dimension. In fact, if we tried to dimension it, it would say it's already constrained. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I tried to throw a dimension on here, it'll tell me that it's already got a dimension. It's already constrained. So this dimension, in other words, is going to do nothing. So I'm just going to cancel it. Okay. So I'm going to shift and middle mouse it just to make sure, that your part looks like mine, that circle is underneath, okay? And if you're good to go on that, then we're going to hit the finish sketch. Okay? So what we're going to now do is extrude. We're going to extrude that guy up, and we're going to lock that guy into the other part. So what will happen then at that point is if we lock it into it, if the base part changes, the circle will change with it. What's it? The circle's diameter is set right to the edge. So if you lock it from the midpoint of that face over to the edge point of the face, the diameter is fixed. It's 2.5. So that's the extruded edge. Okay. So even if you put a dimension on there, the whole edge. It's what they call over constraint. Everybody else doing all right? Okay. So we're going to extrude this. So we're going to go in now, do an extrusion. Notice this does now have Boolean operations on it. So it knows kind of, okay, hey, you're doing a Boolean now. There's a join, there's a cut. What we're going to do is select that path curve. And we're going to tell it to go up. And we're going to tell it to go to a surface. So I'm going to click 2 and then select that top surface. Now it's locked to that surface. If that surface would change, the circle is going to change with it because they're locked together. If you gave this a definite dimension here and it wasn't locked to that, but this guy changed, that would not necessarily change with it. Okay. So if you get it to look like that, go ahead, okay it. And then again, to look around your model, make sure it looks good. It should look like that. Okay. And I'm going to hit an F6 and put it in my isometric mode. Okay. Notice if that isn't working, Nick, you can use this, Nicholas, you can use that corner right there, and that should do the same thing for you. Okay. All right. So let's look at our browser, and we notice that the browser now we have Sketch 1 with extension 1. So Sketch 1 drives extrusion 1, and then Sketch 2 drives extrusion 2, but these guys are locked together. Okay, so that's the really cool part, and that's what we're kind of looking at in this CSG tree kind of concept. Okay, so let's look about how we can rename features. So what we can do is if you go to extrusion 1 and double click the word slowly, it'll open up like that. And I'm going to call that extrusion 1, I'm going to call it base. So instead of just calling it extrusion 1, I'm going to call that my base. And I'm going to come down to extrusion 2, and I'm going to call that my circular end. So this is kind of nice because then you can give it definitive names. And you can even do that with your sketches. Your sketches will actually also let you name them as well if you want to. And you don't have to do that, but it is kind of nice to know, well, instead of, is that just extrusion 1 or 2? That's my base. And then this is my circle, and this is this, and this is this. So it really is helpful to be able to do that. So we're going to go into the base, and we're going to show you how we can create some things here. So I want you to go to the base, just right-click on the word base, okay? And you'll see that we can do what's called show dimensions. So when you show the dimensions, what it's showing you is not only the sketch dimensions, but also the extrusion dimension. So notice there's your sketch, and there's your extrusion dimension, but notice there's no information on that circle per se, because that's a secondary extrusion, okay? But what's cool about this is you can update things within this really easily. So for instance, if you see the 325 overall distance, double click on that and it opens up there. And we're going to change that from 3.25 to 3. So you're going to change that and hit the, okay. Now, you'll notice what happened is the dimension changed, but the part did not. Okay, so that's important. The dimension changed, but the part did not. We're going to fix that here in a minute. We're also going to go to the extrusion, the 2.5 here. We're going to double click on that, and we're going to set that from 2.5 to 2. And again, you'll notice that the dimension may change, but the part didn't update. So in order to make your part update, you have to go up to the top here on your quick access toolbar. Okay, you see it at the top, it looks like a lightning bolt. That's called a local update. So you're going to select local update, and what it did was updated your part. It changed it in both dimensions. And notice also the circle went with it because they're locked together. Did everybody see that? Also, remember when we generated that circle, we didn't give it a diameter because it was locked to the edge, right? So when the edge moved, the diameter of that circle moved as well. Okay. So all of that's set. That's really pretty cool. So we're now going to add a placed feature. We're going to do what's called a placed feature, and we're going to do a hole placed feature. So we're going to go to hole, and we're going to generate this, what's called a simple hole. So click on simple hole, and click on no seat, none. And we're going to come down here to the diameter of that hole, and we're going to change that to a value. I'm going to use 0.75. So whatever's in there, change that. And then I want you to come down and touch the bottom edge of that arc and just click on that, and you should see a hole placed there. Everybody see that? And it just kind of put it wherever it wanted to. So what you're going to do is touch the edge of that bottom arc again, and it should kick it over into the middle position. In other words, it's saying line it up with the center. Center of the hole is center of that circle now, or that edge. Okay. That's really a neat feature right there. And we have to make sure that this also goes through all, which I think it was already set to. So you should be able to hit at this point OK. And then again, we're going to 3D view this to make sure it went through. Make sure it looks like it's right in the center. I mean, if I go to the bottom of that, I can see that looks like that's right in the center of that arc. Okay, and everything looks good. Also notice over on your model browser tree, there is now a placed feature called a hole. And you can open that up, look at it. There's parameters in there. It shows you a sketch, but you didn't do the sketch. The whole tool did the sketch for you. So you could double click on either of those and make really simple edits if you needed to. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're going to create a rectangular cutting feature. We're going to cut a little rectangle out of this, and we're going to punch it through. So we're going to do a cut. So we're going to start that out with a 2D sketch. We're going to select this face right here. And it'll probably bring you to a view like that. I'm going to generate now a rectangle. So I'm going to come up here and do a rectangle. I want to make sure that corner of the rectangle is touching that face, so make sure it gets a good connection there. And then bring that down. Don't worry about the distance. Okay. So it should be locked into that. We're going to now throw some dimensions on there. We want this to be from that face to the edge of the rectangle. We want that to be 0.5. From edge to edge of rectangle, we want that to be 1. So what we've done is centered it right in the middle. Remember, that's 2 inches along the extrusion. And we want to make sure that this side right here, we're going to make that 0.75. Okay? So we have a rectangle that is 1 unit by 0.75 units, and it's equidistant, centered 0.5 here and 0.5 here. Okay? So let me ask you this hypothetically, if I change the overall dimension from this edge to this edge, what will happen to that rectangle? Will it be centered or will it not be centered? If I change this dimension overall from 2, let's say to 5, will this be centered or will it not be centered? It will not be centered because it's saying you're going to go 0.5 from this edge. So if you wanted that to move so that it was centered, you have to do your dimensioning a different method. Okay? All right, so we'll talk about dimensioning a little bit more later, not necessarily today. All right, so we're going to finish this sketch and get it into a view like this, and we're going to drive that rectangle into this part. So we're going to go and do an extrusion. If it doesn't pick up your curve, go ahead and select the curve or the inside the curve. We're going to do what's called a cut. So we're going to cut it, and we're going to cut it to next. And so that's going to just take out 1 cut. And then we're going to hit OK. And when you've done that, you should see your part should look like that. Look it around like this. You should see what's going on here. There's your cut. Notice the cut stops at this face because it only goes to the next surface, which would have been that one. Okay, is that cool? Also notice now we have on our tree, we have another feature here that's been added, extrusion. We could rename that, probably should. I'm going to go ahead and call that rectangular, or rectang. Just going to call it my rect cut. So now the beauty here is that if we want to make a change here with that rectangular cut, we can really easily do that. If you just double click on that rectangular cut extrusion, and instead of going just to the next surface, you want to go through all, you can just hit through all. It'll take it and edit that. And now then, no matter how many surfaces ahead of it or behind it, it gets added, they're going to be cut out. That's a beautiful thing about that. Okay, does everybody see all that? So remember, this is linked to this, this is linked to this. There's a hierarchy going on there. You can edit certain things. Now, you got to be careful where the edits occur, right? Because the edits up front can really screw things down below sometimes, okay? So you have to be careful with that. That doesn't always work perfectly. So we're going to go back, and I'm going to put myself in my home isometric view, and we're going to make a change on some things. We're going to make a change on some of those sketches, and then we're going to see how this updates my model. So I'm going to go back to the base, and I'm going to double click on sketch 1. And you should notice the dimensions as we laid them out. Nothing has really changed there But we're going to make one modification on this and see how this drives everything else. Okay. So we're going to put a fillet right in this area right here, and then see how that drives it. So I'm going to go up here to the fillet command, and I'm going to change that radius to a 0.25 radius, 0.25. And I hit enter and it disappeared, so don't do that. So then you're going to come up here and select this guy and this guy. You should see it locks you in with a new radius. It also shows you those two symbols. That tells you those are tangent, which it should be. So we have a tangent constraint there. You also have a dimension there, which you can edit. So if you like what you see there, you can close that, finish your sketch, and notice when you come out, it's fixed. Okay. It's fixed. All right. What's the time there? Okay, no, don't hit enter. Just go back to this one. Not the picture. There you go. Is that all good? All good? Okay. So the importance of understanding how you can navigate within that CSG, the constructive solid geometry tree, is really, really important. And the more you use Inventor, the easier you're going to get to look at that. Okay. So you can save this part if you want to. If you want to save it, I'm going to just save it. I'm going to save it out to the desktop. I think I suggested you guys might want to create an Inventor folder, and then we can call this whatever we want. I think this was called a saddle bracket or something like that. So go ahead and save it. You can give it a name if you want it. I mean, you don't have to save it. It's just if you want to have something to look at later on. Okay. So he calls this a saddle bracket. So I actually already have that out there. I'm just going to save it over. Okay. All right. So now you can save it. So what we're going to do is now show you how we can add physical properties of this. So this is pretty cool. I think I mentioned initially that if you have a part like this, it can tell you things like volume and surface area. And if I tell it it's a material, it'll tell me how much it weighs, those kind of things. And so we don't have anything assigned to this right now. It has no material properties. So it really doesn't know anything about that. So we're going to go over to the name. You should see the name out here now. It's called, instead of what it was probably called Part 1 IPT, now it should be whatever you called it. I called mine a saddle bracket. So if I right click on that, I can then go to what's called iProperties. iProps. And this guy pops up, this dialog box. And there's quite a few things in there, but we're going to go to the physical tab, the one at the very end. And notice right now it says the material is generic. That means it really has no information. And if you look down at the general properties, mass, area, volume, none of that's being calculated because it's not based on any material. So we're going to open up that generic. And notice there's a whole listing of different types of materials, and there are quite a few. And I believe you could actually probably get more information in other sources if you needed it. So let's grab one that's kind of neat. If we go grab stainless steel, notice the minute you put stainless steel in there, it now shows you density, the mass of that, the area, the volume, center of gravity of that part. Anybody know what the center of gravity is? What's the center of gravity? No one knows? It's the point of balance, basically, right in the middle of it. Okay. So there'd be like an X and a Y and a Z value to it. You can also have other physical properties. They've got principal, global, all kinds of cool stuff. But once you do this and you apply it, look at your part now, and you'll see that it actually looks like it's stainless steel. And you can, like I said, if we go in here and I don't know what that's saying. If we if we drilled a hole in there, it would change my mass properties, or got rid of a hole. So we know exactly how much this thing weighs based on the material. If I change it to another material, I could have other properties. Now you might notice at the top in the quick access toolbar, up here there's a thing that it shows you now stainless steel. You can also assign properties there. So if you drop that guy down, you'll notice you can get to those same tools. You have a little bit better functionality, I think, when you go into mass props. But so for instance, if I change this to copper, notice the look of copper. And if I went back to my iProps being under copper, I would see different physical things going on here. Okay. So it's all pretty cool. Any questions on that? That's kind of important material information for like anybody that was a designer, an engineer, or whatever might need to know that. What's going on with that? That's pretty cool stuff. Any questions on that? And if you want, go ahead, since you drew that, you want to save it, you can just do another save real quick. Okay, we're going to take a look at one other aspect called constraints a little bit. We didn't kind of look at this yet, but you have what are called fundamental parametric constraints. And they are allowing this line to be attached to this line perpendicular, or this arc attached to this tangently, things like that. I'm not going to go too deep in this. I'm going to let you guys work on this. This is out of chapter 10. But once we go through that, then I'll be able to get you guys started and working on your next assignment. So we're going to just begin a new drawing. We're just going to go over here to new. Don't worry if your IPT is still open. That's fine. So we're going to go make sure we go to English again, standard IPT, just create a new part. Okay, so we have these things that are called constraints, and they're kind of turned on all the time. So you can turn them off and on. We're going to go to sketch here. We're going to grab the XY plane. So what we're going to do is just look at constraints real quickly. And you might notice now in the sketch mode, there's this whole area of things called constraints up here. They're next to the dimensions. So notice if we look at them, that one's called a coincident constraint. And then there's a collinear, there's a concentric, there's a lock mode or fix. That's a perpendicular. You have a horizontal constraint and a vertical constraint. So we'll see how these work here. So what we're going to do is go into the line command and just pick a point anywhere. And notice as you drag this guy, if you drag it so that it's parallel with the x-axis, I guess that is, you get that little symbol that pops up. That shows you that's constrained to that. Okay? And it's going to be constrained. That's called a horizontal constraint. So if we click that one right there, then just come up here and do any angle and then come back. And then when you're done, you can hit a OK. So notice sometimes your constraints, is anybody constrained still showing up here? Is anybody's constraint? So a lot of times that'll disappear. So you have this little tool up here that's called show constraints. So if you click on that and then you come down here and select that object, it'll show you that constraint. Now if you come over to here and click that one or there, you notice you don't get any constraint because that guy doesn't have any constraints on him, so to speak. Okay, does that make sense? So here's a cool one. If we want to make this guy now, I'm going to just right click, okay, that. I want to make this guy constrained vertical to this. So what I'm going to do is come over here and hit the vertical constraint. And I'm going to select that guy right there. And notice he made him locked in like that. Now, sometimes what should happen with this, it doesn't always work. You can get OK. If I hit that, I should be able to drag this, but it doesn't let me drag it. But a lot of times if you drag it, it's going to just drag in a vertical mode. I'll show you how that can work, though. Did everybody get their constraint to be horizontal and vertical? Okay. That was no, Molly? You didn't? Okay. So did you get a triangle like that somewhere? Yeah, okay, so put it to either horizontal or vertical. Yeah, vertical. Unless, yeah, don't, I'll tell you what, let's do that. Okay, let's try it. Yeah, don't worry about it, just try to draw one. Get that, get rid of this one. Yes, yeah, I think what was happening, those two guys. So if you delete that line and then draw a line, you'll get the weaver. Okay. You having the same problem? Try to do what I, did you get what I was saying? Okay. Yeah, what about it? You show constraints. Show constraints. Yeah, look at that one. Click on this one, I'll show you that. Click on that one. Great. That one doesn't have a constraint, but constrained in the end, but it's not constrained. Okay. Does that work, you guys? Yep. All right, now watch what happens. We're gonna do a dimension that's gonna drive this. Watch what's gonna happen. So we're gonna put a dimension here from that edge to that edge, and notice it says whatever value you have there. Okay. So because this one is constrained horizontal and the other one is constrained vertical, if I change that, watch what will happen. The angle. So we're gonna double click on the angle. Let's make that, whatever the value is, just make it 45. And you should notice what it did is it allowed this to grow, but it grew vertically. Okay. But it kept that at 45, it kept that whatever, but it actually increased that. Okay. So those are constraints that are kind of cool. Let's show you another constraint that's kind of neat. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this guy. And I'm going to put a circle here. So we're going to put a circle. Just don't worry about where that circle is. Just put him anywhere inside your triangle. So we're going to constrain this circle to one of those lines tangently. So what we're going to do is go into this tangent constraint right here, select the circle, and then select this line, and you'll notice he jumps right to him. When you're done, go ahead and right-click and hit OK. Hit that circle center point and drag that circle, and you notice when you drag it, it's dragging it always locked in tangently. So no matter where that thing drags, I can change the radius, but as I drag it, it's always locked to that line because it's locked in as a tangent constraint. Is that working for everybody? So let's do a constraint. Yeah. You can't get it to tangent constraint? Oh, you're not in. Oh, you got out of the sketch. Okay, here, double click on the sketch. Double click on the sketch you're working on. Right. think it might have been in a different plane. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, we can do another type of you could do another type of lock here. So if you do another constraint, I can constrain that to this. And so now notice as you move your circle, look what it's doing is it's actually two things are happening if I move that circle around. Or if I move the part, if I could pull the part over, how that's constrained. That's pretty neat. So constraints are actually pretty cool the way they work, and some of them are happening automatically and some of them aren't. If you have constraints or don't see all your constraints, again, you can show your constraints on any part. If you want to get rid of a constraint, you can click on the constraint, right click, and then there's a delete. So once you delete that constraint, then it'll exit differently, okay? So constraints are going to be pretty important to a lot of designers. They're very, very important. You know, how we can constrain this piece to this piece to this piece. Okay. So I'm going to let you guys check those out a little bit more. You can go through what he does on this. Basically, that's all he does in that chapter. It's not a big deal. So what I want to do is get you guys started on this lab. And so I'm going to end the recording here. And let's see.